Welcome to the closing of Scala Days 2015. Did everyone have a good time? Hey, guys. Did you have a good time? Yeah? Okay. Come on. All right, so
the Scala team is incredibly enthusiastic about having a good time, but also in repose.
I didn't feel it. I think we should try it again. Did everyone have a good time? All right. So this is well, first off, just wanted to remind everyone, if you have nominations for the Phil Bagwell Award, this is someone who's influential in the Scala community, you feel just really did a good job, please tweet those to Scala Days. I don't think I saw any, so please nominate. There's got to be someone, right? Right? So please nominate people.
Yep, and the other thing we wanted to remind you of, if you hadn't already heard, is that there's an unconference, I believe, tomorrow. Nitro's running this. It's in conjunction with the Scala meetup in SF. It's an unconference. Unconferences are fun. These are fantastic at any Scala every year. If you can go, you should go, because it's great.
So, with that said, this is the Scala team.
Hi.
We're going to have them introduce themselves, and the rule here is you have to tell us your name, your favorite marsupial, and the first thing you contributed to Scala.
Favorite what? Favorite what?
Favorite marsupial.
What's marsupial?
Is that like
kangaroo? I have no idea. Oh, we have
a microphone? Go for it, man.
Does it work?
Okay. I'm Jagesh. It's G-R-Z-E-G-O-R-Z. My favorite
marsupial.
Marsupial. I don't know. I like horses. Okay, so yeah.
That doesn't type check.
Yeah, the first thing you contributed.
Yeah, I'm in Scala.js world.
I'm Jason. I'd say I like the rock wallaby, being from Australia. And the last question, Josh?
The first thing you contributed to Scala.
Maybe to Scala Z.
First thing you contributed was to Scala Z? That counts as the Scala compiler?
Oh, to the compiler.
To the compiler. Well, you've contributed to everything in the Scala ecosystem.
Yeah.
In case you haven't seen him in your pull request queue.
Fixed implicit search.
Oh, implicit search. Cool. All right. Luke?
Hey, I'm Lucas. My favorite, what I still don't know what you mean, is some Italian cheese, I guess. and well, first thing, actually one of the first things I contributed to the Scala compiler was the .NET backend.
Good job.
Yeah.
My name's Adrian. You can't make me choose between my marsupials. I appreciate them all equally. And the first thing I did to Scala, I guess, was type constructor polymorphism.
Higher kind of types, yes!
Yeah, well, I stopped using that name. I don't call it that. What? What are you talking about?
Well, I'm just going to make up names for things you did.
Okay. Yeah, there's no such thing.
So this is the Scala team, and this is an opportunity for everybody to just ask questions. You can ask any kind of question, like, you know, what's 4 plus 7? See if they can still answer it. That sort of thing.
When will the Scala compiler not be buggy? I'll ask that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will the compiler get faster? I think should be the first question.
I mean, so, yeah, you can ask us anything. I mean, especially you, but we might not answer.
So there are 2 microphones, and we're going to have to queue to the microphone to ask questions. So please do. If not, Dan and I will make up questions that we think are...
If you're
or we'll just drink our beers and, you know, have a good time.
There is beer.
Yes.
The problem is you have to go back to get more beer and bring it here. But feel free during this, okay? It's an open discussion. Do we have any questions yet? Let's start with the faster one.
Well, no. Thank you for the first question.
Is this thing on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Structural types, so...
No.
Next
sorry. I thought that was the question.
Yeah. Okay, so the thing that some people like to call structural types, is it something that's, that there's anything planned for in terms of either sort of the backing implementation or the feature set?
No. No, I mean, it's a good question, and right now it's a bit of a bad idea to use structural types because of the runtime performance hit. On Scala.js, it's much nicer when you compile that to that platform. No, I mean, we don't really have any plans to change that. I mean, maybe eventually something will change with that, but for now, I think, yeah, I mean, we know that it's kind of slow, and I don't know if someone wants to add anything to that or whether there's a follow-up on that.
It's not clear what other options are actually workable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what we've got is correct and a little bit slow.
I mean, maybe eventually we could, use some of the newer Java features for it, but right now, like, the only thing we would have is to generate classes that correspond to those things, but it doesn't really work. I mean, you can't really, like, there is no alternative that we can think of that would actually work and be faster.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
My question is, when can we expect a modern, formal Scala spec?
Oh. What, Markdown isn't modern enough for you? Well, I guess my microphone keeps kind of sliding down. I have this high-tech piece of paper keeping it up. Maybe I should just hold it up. So yeah, the question was for you, is Markdown isn't modern enough for you? I'm just kidding. So, I mean, we recently did convert it to Markdown, and it's now part of the source tree to make it easier to keep it up to date and for people to contribute to it, at least for the glaring omissions or inconsistencies that might still be in there. I don't think there will be any like enormous changes in the 2x spec. There will be, I mean, we are working on keeping it up to date, and I have a bunch of things on my backlog to add, like name-based pattern matching and SAM support that's now experimental in 2.11. And if you have any like concrete omissions in mind, I'm happy to talk about them. At EPFL, I think the last talk I ever gave as an academic was the curse of Dottie, which is basically everybody who I ever worked with or who worked on Dottie before me. Dottie is the type system for the Scala 3 version, right? Is either in farming, Microsoft, or TypeSafe now. But the effort continues, and they're making progress. And so there's a mechanized proof for that next generation of the type system, but it's really hard, and it's going to be for a super small core of the language. So as soon as you go to a bigger, you want to cover more of the language, you're just going to have to get hand wavy, or it's going to be so precise that there's just nothing you can really do with it. That said, we really do want to make it more clear, and we're, for example, very impressed with the IntelliJ guys who re-implemented a whole type checker based on one interpretation of the many interpretations of the current spec. And so I'll acknowledge it's not great right now, and if we had more time, we would be spending it on that, but we don't, so we don't. Yeah. Sorry. Anything to add? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I don't know if this is the right group to ask, so second question. ScalaDoc is sort of in a sorry state at the moment. Are there any plans to either revamp it, replace it, or at least document it properly?
Yes. I'm happy to provide a more positive answer to your next question. And it's even more positive because it's not us who's doing it. So I know of at least one person, I won't call him out because I don't think he's publicly announced he's working on that. But there's someone using Scala Meta to implement the next gen ScalaDoc that fixes a lot of the problems that we have with current generation ScalaDoc. So that's the short answer. If you're curious about more details, we can talk about it offline. I can connect you with that person.
Yeah, one more sort of short-term thing. I think our documentation page was just updated recently to have better guides on how to write ScalaDoc. So what tags are available. They used to be available before, but they were buried in a outdated wiki. So Dick Walls just updated the main doc site. So if you're interested in how to use current ScalaDoc better, check that out.
Will do. Thank you.
Actually, I have a quick question. Can everybody hear us in the back? But yeah. Okay. Sorry, we should have checked that in the beginning.
The monitors are off.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
You're good. You're good.
It's doing it. I'm curious about the status of SIP 23 on singleton types. Does it have a good chance? Are there any blockers?
Time. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So it's actually mostly implemented. I have a pull request in my own fork where I have a checklist of things to do, and there's more and more, there's more check marks than open unchecked boxes now. So I would really like to get it in, and I was just talking to Miles about it actually. I could definitely use a little bit of help. Otherwise, symbols are not going to make it into singleton types. So right now, it's mostly implemented for what I feel comfortable doing. What I was stuck on kind of was type inference. How often do you want to infer a singleton type so that you can actually pass it to those methods and get that singleton type? Because right now, every type that's inferred is widened. And which is probably the right thing to do, because otherwise you end up with super precise types everywhere. And while that's great while you're using shapeless and so on, it's not great for anything else. So it's a hard trade-off. But I think it will make it in. It'll probably be like 2.12 that it'll actually be merged in by now, because 2.11 is going into maintenance mode. We have to start focusing on 2.12. Yeah, probably, unfortunately, because it missed the window for being an experimental feature first in 2.11, and that's kind of how we tend to do things. Is first it needs to go through enough minor revisions that people can use it as an experimental feature before we turn it on by default. And that hasn't happened in the 2.11 cycle, and given the time frame, it seems unlikely to happen, unfortunately. So yeah, it'll be an opt-in on 2.12.
Yep. Hi. Could you guys give a approximate roadmap and time frame for binary compatibility? Please.
Well, I guess we could talk for the next. How much time do you have left? Maybe I should let someone else answer if you want.
So I think the answer is we're slowly moving towards that. So with Java 8 features, we will have a better shot at, like trait, like adding, for example, a new member to a trait. Like with default implementation, we can directly have a chance to directly translate to something on JVM that will preserve the semantics and work as you expect. But there are some things which you still cannot do, like adding an argument to a method with the default parameter, like default value. There's nothing on JVM that we can translate to. So even if this is a source compatible change, it's a binary compatible change. And there are more of those kind of surprising changes that are source compatible and they're binary compatible. So I think we'll be going closer to this. For me, it's hard to say when we'll get all the tools necessary for locking us down completely and having 100% binary compatibility.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's hard without controlling the VM to have enough tools to do that long-term binary compatibility, short of just never changing anything. And yeah, so you need to own a platform, and I think that's where Martin was starting to make us think about that, and is his proposals for Tasty a way to kind of own a platform in that way. Those are still fairly embryonic, the ideas, but it's an important enough problem that we need to give them full thought.
Maybe on the positive side, like Scala 2.11 is binary compatible between releases, and we didn't hear any, or I don't think we had much complaints about things breaking between minor releases on 2.11, and 2.11 has been out for a year or what? Yeah. So I mean, of course, when you switch to the next major release, you need to, you tend to have even source incompatible changes. Usually, upgrading is a bit of work. But within the 2.11 timeframe, which is more than a year, 1.5 years, 2 years, our releases are compatible, and I think that's been a positive story overall.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and so we think about this a lot, and I actually think binary compatibility as a constraint is a good one to have. You don't want to move too fast. You don't want your APIs to change all the time. So then there's the gratuitous binary incompatibilities, like changing the lazy val encoding, or the way that adding a method to a trait, and that's really what Tasty wants to address by incorporating these ideas into the platform. And in the meantime, we're doing that by aligning with what Java has to offer in the platform, so that would be default methods for traits. But in general, we try to be conservative, even between major releases, so that upgrades are easier. And we the idea is that we alternate compiler and library releases, and the compiler release we deprecate a lot of stuff that is going to change in the next library cycle of the release. So let's say 2.11. 2.12 is a compiler release. 2.13 will focus on changing the library. So in 2.12, we set the stage by deprecating a lot of things. And if you ignore those, it's going to hurt when you upgrade to 2.13. Because we do believe in evolving. I mean, we don't want to remain completely stagnant. We don't want to have binary compatibility completely choke innovation. But we do believe that we should go through a deprecation cycle first. And that way kind of get the best of both worlds. Yep, we can hear it.
Yep.
I can hear it.
Yep. Okay. So, sorry, a newbie question. Maybe this already exists or something. Is there a good way for library or framework authors to bundle in or utilize Scala without, and being able to publish a jar that kind of encapsulates that, so that it can be used without depending on the Scala libraries?
I think we can pass that question to Josh.
Yeah. So when we do that, what we do is we use ProGuard, and we just kind of minimize the Scala library out of there. So when you use Scala, if you're using any of the standard, if you're using almost anything, you're going to actually rely on things like list or option. They're kind of in sequence. They're kind of built into the language. So, what?
Predef.
Oh, and predef. So what you do is you build a tool that only uses list. That's it. And then that can actually ProGuard really, really well, to the point where you almost don't notice that it depended on Scala size-wise.
I think I understood the question differently. You're asking how you could bundle with the Scala library, and I guess with assemblies, SBT assembly.
SBT assembly will let you bundle everything. Yeah, so ProGuard will make the library disappear if you want to just have a jar with only your code. ProGuard, does total program optimization. If you want to just bundle SBT assembly, there's SBT one jar, which is this guy. And
use assembly.
But yeah, use assembly instead. Anyway, any other questions?
So if I'm using two different libraries that were built against two different versions of the Scala core libraries.
Like 2.10 and 2.11?
Yeah. That's not supported. That's not supported.
Yeah. Microservices.
or what you do is you make a Java interface, a pure interface, and then you load them in different class loaders, and then everything goes
SBT
back.
does that all the time.
It's beautiful.
You talked about aligning Scala features to the bytecodes that are available in the JVM. Have you thought about participating directly in the Java community process to...
Good question.
We go to the language summit. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
How we participate in the Java community process.
Yeah. Our understanding is it's hard to participate that in a very casual way. It takes sort of real dedication and time, and given that our team in total is pretty small, we can't really actively participate in that. But we've been talking to a couple of Oracle guys who've attended today informally, and JVM Language Summit, which is really designed for that sort of informal collaboration, and we'll continue to do that.
It's pretty effective, actually. They do pay attention to what we do, and very often they are interested in learning. For example, we're looking at value classes and specialization, and our experiences, and that what we provided influences their decision on the new bytecode design. So that's how that works in practice.
Yeah, and rumor has it that they use Scala C to stress test the JIT. So.
So I do a lot of work that uses the Scala compiler as a library and stops it after the typeware phase. There are two things I would like from a compiler, from the Scala compiler specifically. Can I have them? The first is a parser which accurately produces an abstract syntax tree that represents the source code and has not transformed it. And the second is a compiler that produces immutable data structures so that I don't have to marshal all my accesses through a compiler thread.
So on the parser side, we are working on a new parser based on Scala 2.11 parser, which very much tries to address that concern. So in Scala Meta, we only have immutable and very much close to source trees. We also have information about tokens. So for example, you can look at this tree and say what kind of tokens are available underneath. Not only do we have tokens, we also have correlation between tokens and oppositions. So it's very much this kind of thing you want, I would guess. But right now there is no release, so it's not clear when it's going to be done. So it's work in progress.
So to follow up quickly, it sounds like you're doing a lint checker or something like that. Is that true, or?
No, I'm working on static analysis over Scala.
Okay, yeah, so even better. Yeah. So we have Abide. I don't know if you've looked at that. So Scala Abide, we haven't really promoted it because we're only starting to work on it now. I mean, we had a really good intern who worked on it at EPFL, and he did an amazing job. And so we're picking that up finally, hopefully soon. And Abide is basically kind of like a macro engine for static analysis. So you can plug in your own traversals and your own rules, but it actually aims to provide just what you said, except that we don't deal with like lower level, like we don't deal with lexical syntax, and we like mutability. No, I'm just kidding. We don't like mutability, but we have it anyway.
So I understand that Abide will later be able to do transformations on code. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah. I understand that Abide will later be able to do transformations on code, which could potentially remove a lot of the what would be described as busy work in sort of small syntax changes, for example, removing procedure syntax. If that becomes something real, and it's something Martin's talked about a few times, if that becomes real and it's something Martin has talked about a few times, does it enable there to be a lot more small syntax changes, tidy-ups, things that people would consider small gripes but would never be worth forcing people to go through the pain of changing manually? Does that then enable those as potential future tidy-ups?
I think there's still even if you have the doors open to, many like dialects in the front end with that tasty format behind them to unify it into the compiler pipeline, I still really think there's a big benefit in avoiding the proliferation of dialects for things like, simple things like which syntax highlighter in GitHub is going to know which dialect you're using, or IntelliJ, or there's so many tools which are based on having a unified grammar for the language. You really don't want to go too far away from that. I'm yet to sort of believe that the benefits of having pet syntaxes outweighs the costs of that.
I was thinking more in terms of throwing away some old syntax, like procedure syntax, or
yeah. I don't know. Okay. So if you're talking about sort of subsetting,
forevermore and consider it progress, but things we would never have considered changing before simply because it would be hassle for all users. If that can simply be changed with pressing a button, transforming the source code.
Yeah, and then actually EPFL's written a tool called srewrite, which can go through your sources and change procedure syntax to :unit equals, and that for sure will be part of any language upgrade or any new release of the language which actually starts to deprecate that stuff. So from my point of view, it's an absolute prerequisite that any kind of busy work like that comes with a tool to go and fix it.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the other use case I think would be interesting would be for library evolution, like, you know, getting rid of get on future. You know, it's easier when you can just rewrite it to methods that still exist.
What's the level of planned support for tasty tools?
Yeah. Well, you know, we saw the tasty spec a couple of weeks ago, I suppose.
A couple of days, yeah.
So,
yeah, that's an overestimate.
So yeah, we're providing feedback on the spec, but when it comes to talking about tooling, we support the work at EPFL to sort of make Scala C, a compiler plugin for Scala C, emit tasty, and then we'll start experimenting with what that can give us for interop and DODI migration, binary compatibility. It's still a sort of a topic for experimentation and research, and not one that we can sort of add to roadmaps just yet. Yeah.
And I can add one thing. It's incremental compiler in SBT needs something like tasty, and we have like our own hand-rolled thing inside. So that would be kind of like first obvious case that you could go and replace it and like battle test tasty whether it's actually a thing that, you know, can be useful. So probably that would be the first venue where we explore.
Okay, thank you. So, related, I heard rumors that the Scala backend that takes tasty and converts it to bytecode is going to be called tasteless. Can you confirm or deny?
Couldn't possibly confirm or deny.
We'll have to see if Miles has already taken that domain name.
Yeah. Right. Trying to represent some of my friends at the development group in Israel. What's the big deal, aesthetics aside, with procedure or syntax? Why do you hate it so much?
I think there's just a common source of beginner mistake where you think you've. I forget the exact.
Well, you just write the block.
Like a refinement.
What?
It looks like a refinement.
Well,
yeah, you forget to put the equals in there, and you think you've inferred a type, which is the result type of the block of code. So that confusion hits people, and they call this later on, and they don't get a value back. They get back something of type unit.
It should have never gotten in there. It's just an irregularity that doesn't serve any purpose.
Yeah. The historical motivation, I think, was to reduce the number of concepts that someone needed to write Hello World in Scala. But seriously, like to say, well, you don't have to explain what unit means to write Hello World in Scala. But the downsides of like confusing inference seems to outweigh that. So
it is one of the most common mistakes in training. Like when you give a Scala training course, everybody screws that up. You always forget the equals because when you're coming from Java. So I can attest. It's a big reason to get rid of it.
Just to give a little counterpoint to that, I can honestly say that I've never seen that to be a problem either in training or in practice. So I don't know. I reckon that removing irregularities from the language is always a good thing, but maybe the cost of people, getting people who are already used to it to readjust to the full syntax, just might not be worth it.
Well, the cool thing is if you use IntelliJ, you can type the procedure syntax, and it will just transparently turn it into, without any keystrokes, transparently turns it into the new recommended syntax. So.
And it doesn't seem to be a big deal one way or another. It's just, removing stuff has a hidden cost to it. So I'm challenging whether or not it's worth it.
Well, I mean, it's worth it purely for the puzzlers who are out for them. And this is one of them, or multiple, and they just have to go.
Right. Okay.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
Oh yeah, you're the one with all the questions?
Yeah, I actually have a legit question. So
let's say you're working on something that's kind of pushing the language pretty hard, and you're doing something interesting or something, and I don't know, you're running things along, and then all of a sudden the compiler crashes in SPT. I mean, it happens almost never now. Like you guys have done a really good job, but it does happen. What's the best way of going about minimizing that so I can put it in Jira for you guys? What do you want to see, and what tools, what techniques should I follow to puzzle it through?
Yeah, so I spend a fair bit of time helping people kind of do that process, so I'll take this one. I'd say that the first step would be, if it's open source and you can just push the whole project that we can try it out, you can just do that as a first step, right to the mailing list and say, I'm getting this exception, has anyone seen it? And at that stage, if you're lucky, someone might try it and recognize the error, find an existing bug, and then you don't have to go through that process. If you actually have, say, closed source software and a new sort of bug, and you want to help us to create a minimization, generally it's just a matter of some sort of binary search of figuring out where things are happening. The crash messages can sometimes help you locate the sort of line of code that's related, that's triggering this, but if it's in the back end, that's a bit less reliable and actually can be a bit misleading. So jump onto Gitter and we can maybe help a bit in real time.
Hey, so are you guys keeping in mind the increasing number of Scala users targeting the Android platform and the implications that may have when you guys introduce Java 8 related features and so on?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. We were kind of hoping that maybe someone would write a bytecode rewriting tool for that. And I mean, I think one of the guys, like Rémi Forax or something, has a tool that does the invoke dynamic but offline. So yeah, we definitely considered this trade-off when we considered the move, but I think Java 8 is such a compelling upgrade that we just couldn't resist.
Yeah, I think that tool is called Retro Lambda. Yeah. So in theory, you would have to add Retro Lambda to the pipeline before you got to hit Android. If our standard library starts calling methods in sort of Java 8 standard library, which is a possibility, we haven't quite figured out what's the right pace to start doing that. Then you might also be in a bit of trouble because I guess Android standard library is still only at, is it 6 or 7? 7. So yeah, I mean, I think mostly the new stuff we'd be using is actually already in 7, like Java NIO, so you might be okay there. You also have the option to kind of continue using Scala to 11 for a longer period, and that's part of our roadmap, is to support that for a longer time. So that's those are the sort of options that we've got open. We do have customers who are using Android, but we can't sort of defer the jump to Java 8 into 12 really too much longer. So that's the balance we're trying to strike.
Thank you.
There's another thing.
I think so. Just speak loudly.
Okay. There's another thing that came out recently. It's still very early and it might not happen. I don't know exactly. Anyway, it was on the Facebook React conference. Facebook, they had this, somebody had a talk, they announced this project called React Native, where the idea is that they would basically provide the React framework, but on Android and iOS, and have bindings to the native UI elements of each platform. And then if you write an app, you can write it in Scala, in JavaScript or in Scala.js. You compile it to JavaScript, you use the React Native, for the UI. The rest runs in the JavaScript VM that is anyway on your phone. And I guess if you're not doing some super high performance stuff, that might be actually a very, very good option in the future.
Can we go from JavaScript to Lisp first before we go to Android?
Isn't that the same thing?
Yeah.
It's true.
Some time ago, I remember some talk about a tool helping migrate from Scala versions that would rewrite the source in certain ways, such as the procedure syntax going away, then rewriting that with a colon unit equals. Is such a tool still a thing?
Yeah, it exists. It's called S Rewrite. It's on the LAMP EPFL GitHub. Because we haven't actually got rid of procedure syntax, we haven't really publicized that yet, or maybe battle tested it too much. But I think they used it to migrate test cases from our sort of Scala 2 compiler over to the Dotty compiler. So it has been used to some degree.
What's the name again?
S Rewrite.
Like Scala Rewrite?
Yeah.
It's also on the longer term roadmap for Abide. So we'd like to eventually develop this as a companion to Abide, but that's longer term.
Hi. So we've seen forks of the Scala compiler.
This is the first question last time. Where were you?
Oh, oops. Well, if you don't mind answering it again. So do you plan on working with like the type level guys, incorporating some of the work that they're doing, type lambdas, for example?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I didn't mean where were you in the sense that where were you then? It's like, why weren't you asking this as the first question? So, no, I mean, I think forks are I mean, I don't know. I don't want to steal every question. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, the guys down here.
Yeah, actually, since I'm handing out.
Hey, hold on. Can you come up on stage? Yeah, on this side of the speaker.
Yeah, why don't you come up on stage?
So yeah, there's been a little bit of a hiatus in the type level Scala fork for reasons which people are probably aware of towards the end of last year. But it's gearing up for a reboot, I guess, in the next couple of months. So there's going to be quite a lot more visible activity around that fairly shortly. And I guess probably one of the first things is going to be the 42.type stuff, SIP23. And I know there's several things that I'm very keen to look at as well. Which I mean, the project is still it's still there. It's just that most of the people who've been most heavily involved in it have been extremely preoccupied with other things over the last few months. Other than that, it's all still there and it's all still carrying on. And I think actually. One of the things that I've been really, really enthusiastic about around the start of the CATS project is seeing how many interesting collaborations there have been between other type level projects in a way that I don't think we've really seen before. And I think this is making me really very enthusiastic about the whole type level project. And I think in particular, the idea of being able to co-evolve the type level libraries with type level Scala. I think there will be some very, very interesting. I mean, I guess 42.type is actually part of that. I mean, if we have that in the language, that will be something that would, I would make a whole bunch of changes to Shapeless to make use of that. And I think that there can be lots of things along those lines. And they will hopefully feed back into the type-safe Scala compiler as well. And that will be. It's always been intended to be a two-way street.
I think that's the important point, is that we love forks. I mean, that's great. I mean, it's contributions and it's activity around the language. What we don't like is fragmentation. So I don't think that's good for anybody. And so we definitely want to keep that dialogue open and make sure that Miles knows that we're not going to remove subtyping from Scala. I'm just kidding. But, since you mentioned type functions, that's something we would like to add, and SIP23 or 42.type or SIP42 or whatever you want to call it. I spent a lot of time, trying to get that in and, ran out of time because we also have customers and stuff like that that I need to work for. But in general, we really want these features that would make type-level libraries more pleasant to implement and use. We want them in mainline Scala. And we see, from our perspective, type-level Scala is a great incubator for that. I mean, the compiler side of things. And it's a great way to experiment, and it's a great way to see what works and what doesn't. But in the end, I think we really have to agree on finding common ground of what is actually Scala and which features are in Scala. And I think it would be dangerous to say, well, certain things work this way in type-level Scala, and then in official Scala it works that way. I think that's a path I would like to avoid, and that we want to spend quite some time making sure that that's not necessary.
Sure.
So can I summarize as forks are good, but knives are bad?
What's bad? Knives are,
Yeah.
What about spoons?
All right. So I
There is
think
no
we have
spoon.
time for one more question. Or actually, no, it's 6:45. So thank you, Scala team. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for attending, and have a great day. I think there's actually still stuff out there and people hanging out, but.
Actually, one more thing. Also, thank you for contributing, and let us know, please, by any means, if there's any way we can make that easier for you, or if you have any thoughts on the process. That's one of our key goals this year, is to make sure that that's a smooth thing for you to do. So thank you for all your contributions, and thank you for letting us know how we can make that better.